I'm standing at the door of the mansion with the donation book. I don't know how to open my mouth, but my wife is urging me to move quickly, saying that I don't want to make my boyfriend unhappy. Gwenquin was signing organ donation papers when Lucy Lawson's call came in. Chad's flight is at 5 p.m. Make sure you've cleared out your stuff by 3 p.m. I don't want him to be upset. As soon as she hung up, Lucy sent her usual money transfer notification. Sean smiled wryly. After 5 years, he still hadn't managed to warm her heart. But none of that mattered now. He was dying anyway. At the hospital, the doctor explained, Mr. Quinn, we need a direct family member to sign off on organ donation. Do you have anyone who can? Ian looked at where the doctor was pointing on the form, feeling a pang of bitterness. He thought back to 5 years ago. His parents had died in a car accident, leaving him alone in the world. Besides Lucy, he had no close family left, but he didn't want Lucy to know about his condition, so he forced himself to ask, if I consent myself, is that not enough? The doctor considered for a moment before replying, it's hospital policy. Given your current condition, you likely only have about a month left. You really should inform your family, especially since your records show you are married. We can't proceed with donation without your wife's consent. Although Ron didn't want to accept that, he had terminal leukemia at only 30 years old. It was his reality now. He had no choice. He thanked the doctor and left with the organ donation forms. In truth, he had decided to donate any usable parts of his body as soon as he was diagnosed. Even if there wasn't much they could use, at least his corneas could help someone. Sign checked the time. He had 2 hours before Lucy's deadline, enough time to visit Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper who had worked for Lucy's family for 20 years. Mrs. Lee had gone blind from corneal disease 3 years ago. For the past 3 years, the Lawson family had sent Zem as their representative to visit her. Over time, Mrs. Lee had grown very fond of Sin. She saw him as her own child and always thought of him first whenever she had anything nice to share. Sign walked in to find Mrs. Lee sitting on the couch drinking tea. Hearing his footsteps, she immediately called out, Sign, is that you? Son smiled. Your hearing is so sharp you knew it was me right away. Mrs. Lee laughed. I may not recognize everyone, but I'd know your footsteps anywhere. She handed him a small cake from beside her. Lucy brought these earlier. Then she asked curiously, why didn't you two come together? San hesitated. When was she here? Mrs. Lee sounded surprised. Not long ago at all. She took Smain's hand. Are you two having problems? She didn't voice her other thought. Why had Lucy been with a strange man? Sign and Lucy's marriage had been one of convenience arrangement. Lucy's family was pressuring her to settle down. Although Lucy had a boyfriend at the time, he was from a poor background. Under relentless pressure from the Lawsons, he had eventually been forced to move abroad. Lucy had spiraled into depression afterwards, losing herself and partying and drinking. Worried, her family had hired a therapist for her mind. Spine Sign had fallen for Lucy the moment he saw her, but Lucy despised Spine, saying he reeked of bookishness and wasn't manly at all. Titan let it bother him. He patiently tried to counsel Lucy each day, telling her stories to cheer her up. Even when she covered her ears and turned her back, Sin never got angry. He understood that people who'd been hurt were often emotionally volatile, especially someone like Lucy. Over time, Lucy seemed to dislike Sin less. She started to accept his guidance. Later, when the Lawsons again pressured Lucy to go on arranged dates, she had suddenly grabbed Sin's hand and declared, Fine, I'll get married. Yes, but I choose him. Sign had been stunned. He thought Lucy had genuinely changed her mind about him and developed feelings. But then Lucy presented him with a marriage contract and he realized she was just using him to avoid the arranged dates. Thinking of all that, Sign took a deep breath and reassured Mrs. Lee with a smile. No, everything's fine. She's just busy with work and our schedules don't line up, so we couldn't come together. Aang then slipped a bank card into Mrs. Lee's hand. My job situation is changing, so I may not be able to visit for a long time. Please keep this card and use it for anything you need. Don't deprive yourself. Aang glanced at the time.